Hey, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me my Columbia Law School classmate, Gary Loeb, who's the General Counsel at Intuitive Surgical. Gary, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to see you virtually. We need to get together in person one of these days
Well,
again.
it has taken a while to schedule this. So I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite a
True.
while.
It's true.
So let me start by asking you why you went to Columbia Law School. I mean, I know why I went there. Why did you go there?
It's a good question. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer from a very early age.
Oh, really?
When I was 9 years old, and this is crazy because neither of my parents graduated college. So I was sort of first generation in college. And when I was 9 years old, I had to write a short story as part of an elementary school assignment. And at the end, there was sort of this thing where they wanted you to do about the author. And so I wrote that I lived in Las Vegas at the time, that, I lived in Las Vegas, I had a dog, I had two sisters, and that when I grew up, I wanted to go to Stanford and major in biology, and I wanted to go to UCLA Law School. So I got the law school wrong, but somehow at age 9, I have this sense I wanted to be a lawyer. And I had a cousin who was an important sort of mentor to me. He was sort of much older. I was the youngest of my generation, and he was one of the oldest of my generation. So more like sort of an uncle or dad to me, who was a lawyer. And I think that must have been part of the influence. And I always remember thinking, oh, lawyers are paid to argue, and I love to argue. So it was sort of just, I never really re-examined what I wanted to be. I just sort of planned to be a lawyer. So,
Well, what about the Stanford and biology? That seems very specific too. What was the thinking there?
I was just a hippy dippy liberal arts. I really took the classes I loved. So I ended up with two majors: a bachelor's in science in molecular biology, and a bachelor of arts in English. And it's because those were the classes I loved,
Huh.
and really really enjoyed that. There was probably a period of maybe 3 months where I was a junior and I was taking this amazing immunology class.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I thought, oh, maybe I want to be a biology researcher. And I flashed back to this moment. Stanford had this biology core where everyone sort of took the same three classes. And one of the people who taught the classes said, you shouldn't go into biology research unless you have the type of personality that once every 5 to 10 years, you can have an aha moment. And that's enough for you to continue through the next 5 to 10 years. And I just knew that was not me. And when he said that, and I remember it really vividly, it's a guy who actually writes, I think, for the Wall Street Journal today. Sapolsky's his last name, and he's a neurobio
Hmm.
researcher. And I think it was actually, some of the best advice you could get, because
Yeah.
you don't get constant feedback
Yeah,
in
right.
biology research. And
Yeah,
I
right.
think that's something that, especially at an earlier age, I thrived on.
Well, how did you like? Well, first of all, did you not get into UCLA, or did you even apply to UCLA?
I applied to UCLA. I really decided I wanted to go to Columbia. I applied to a couple law schools, and I actually, in the end, I got into Stanford and Columbia, and it was very tempting to me to stay at Stanford because
Yeah.
it had been so amazing there. But I went to Columbia because um, it it was it was so different for me. I had grown up in Las Vegas and Dallas. I had
Right.
lived then in, Stanford slash Palo Alto for 4 years, which is sort of at the time, the quintessential sort of suburban
Yeah.
bubble. And I had only been to the East Coast twice in my life. I had never left the United States,
Hmm.
except for a quick trip to Mexico once. I had, only I'd been to New York once briefly when I decided that I wanted to apply to Columbia Law School, and with some friends who lived in Westchester. And for me, it was like not just more education, but also life education, life experience, and learning how to live in a big city.
Yeah.
So I literally showed up the day before classes began at Columbia because I was working that summer,
Huh.
and I had a, a UPS box with me, and like no one shows up in New York that way, but that's how I showed up. So that was my Columbia initiation. So.
And how did you like Columbia Law School? Did you like it? What was your experience with that?
um, I liked it okay. I wished, in retrospect, I think I would have enjoyed law school more if I had taken a couple years off between college and law school. So I went straight from college,
Mhm.
and I think it's nice now because now I'm 54 and I've sort of been able to be a lawyer for almost 30 years, and I have a whole range of experiences and still a lot of energy left. But in an ideal world, I think I would have been a better law school student and enjoyed law school more if I had had 2 or 3 years of life experience. With that said, I made a couple close friends. I loved being a student in New York City, and I I took advantage of it to its fullest, and that was great. We were at Columbia and in New York at a sort of transitional time, as you know,
Yeah.
both for the city, the Upper West Side, and sort of what that meant, but also just for Columbia University generally. And the law school was sort of between facilities, and nothing was great. So there was kind of all that was the background noise.
So when did you decide what kind of lawyer you wanted to be? I mean, I know it was your childhood dream and all that, but when did you kind of figure that out?
Um, Pretty early on at Columbia, I thought I wanted to be an intellectual property litigator,
Mm,
which is sort of what I did for the first part of my career.
mm,
Part of it, I took there weren't a lot of IP courses, and one of the reasons why I liked Columbia was it had at the time. I mean, it's crazy to think today because intellectual property is such a core part of the law school curriculum.
yeah.
But 91 to 94, there were a lot of schools that had a single class that was patent, trademark, and copyright, and that was it. And
Mhm.
we had Jane Ginsburg, and so we had amazing trademark and copyright. Pamela Samuelson did a guest professorship and taught copyright 1 year. And then we had a patent class. It was called Technological Properties. Wasn't the best class taught by a professor who was really a crim law professor by training, but there were also some good seminars because of folks who were adjunct, who were at big companies in New York doing IP law and practicing IP law, and were willing to come to Columbia. So I think we had a really good curriculum, and it really energized me. So I took our patent law class, I took trademarks, I took copyright. I really loved all that. I My second year summer, I spent part of my time in a music law firm, and I really decided that that's what I wanted to do, was intellectual property litigation. And then it wasn't until I got to a law firm that I decided that I really liked patent litigation. So.
Well, tell me about the patent litigation part of it. So you dived into that. Tell me a little bit about how you enjoyed that.
Well, I was attorney 37 at Quinn Emanuel, which is now a very large firm, but at the time was a really burgeoning firm in downtown Los Angeles, and was definitely was trying to cultivate a sense of culture of, we dress casually, we hire the brightest, most ambitious people, but we trust them to sort of set their own sort of standards and that sort of thing, and a little bit dog eat dog. But part of going there was they had a pretty strong employment law practice and civil law practice, and they sort of saw the writing on the wall and were really trying to break more into patent law. And myself and one other associate both had bachelors in science, and so we were eligible to take the patent bar. Neither one of us had really thought we wanted to do that. And I basically got told, you will take the patent bar and you will pass. Grady, my colleague, was told the same thing, and so we studied together for the patent bar and took it. And I kind of felt like that was sort of destiny for me. I thought that's what I wanted, and they wanted me to do that, and so I started working almost exclusively on IP, not just patent law, but IP related cases, and they would be able to tout on their website, oh yes, we now have 2 attorneys who are members of the patent bar. So,
Yeah. Well, did you like patent litigation as much as you thought you were going to?
not at Quinn Emanuel. I was working on, I worked on a case with car alarms that were turned on and off by your lock switch. I worked on a case involving printing technology, laser printing technology. None of it was, I worked on a couple design patent cases for Mattel, but none of it was as rewarding as once I finally got in-house and started at Genentech and started working on biotech patent cases. Then I think that's when I realized, oh, this is amazing stuff. So.
Well, tell me how that opportunity arose. I know that was a pivotal inflection point in your career.
It was one of those stars aligned moments. I had been living in LA. I was with my partner at the time who was in the movie industry. In 1998, we'd been together a couple years, and I told him I really want to move up to the Bay Area. And I started interviewing at some law firms and got a couple offers to join and to do life sciences, patent law. And there was almost none of it going on in Los Angeles at the time. It was very regional in San Francisco and New York. And he told me, hey, I love you, Gary, but there's nothing for me to do up in the Bay Area. I'm down here in LA. So it's either me or San Francisco. And I chose him and didn't move up to San Francisco. And then almost exactly a year later, he got totally out of the blue, totally unsolicited, a job offer to go work to lead one of George Lucas's companies at the time, Skywalker Sound, and it required him to move up to San Francisco. And so I called up one of the law firms that had given me an offer, Howard Rice, a firm that no longer exists. It's been merged into Arnold and Porter here in San Francisco. And said, hey, would you consider renewing my offer from last year? And they were more than happy to do that. And so I moved up to the Bay Area with him. Within 2 months of my joining, the head of the life sciences group, Patty Thayer, who's been a mentor of mine, and I've been her client, and we've sort of crossed paths in many different ways. She left Howard Rice and went to Heller Ehrman. And I really did not want to go to a bigger firm. And the same week I learned that she was leaving to go to Heller Ehrman, a friend of a friend called me out of the blue, and I had dinner with him, and he said, I work at Genentech, I'm a corporate lawyer, but we're looking to hire a litigator. Would you ever be interested? And I said, well, normally no, I've been at this job for 2 months. But I said, I just learned that the person who I came to work with is leaving the firm, so sure. And 3 months later, the first working day of January 2000, year 2000, I started at Genentech, and it changed my life working.
Wow, that's quite a story. Well, tell me why did it change your life, and what did you like about it so much that was so different than what you were doing before?
I really loved being in-house. I loved solving problems. I loved learning the business. I sort of compared it, as a litigator, you're always just working on the exact case before you. You think a little bit about the long-term consequences of the case, but much less so, especially back in those days in the late 90s. And in-house, you have to live with the consequences of your cases. So when you make decisions, you can't just necessarily cut corners to win at the trial level. You need to win on appeal. You need to make sure that it doesn't impact any of your positions in other cases. You need to make sure that it's not impacting the business so much that you're requiring people who should be doing other things to be being deposed as witnesses, or being sort of helping you find experts or things like that. So it's just a much more integrative way of looking at how law is just one part of business risk. And for me, that's the part of being a lawyer that I enjoyed the most. I think I wasn't as good at compartmentalizing as a sort of law firm attorney, and sort of being able to be really mean to opposing counsel one day, and then 2 months later being co-counsel with them on a case, and being best friends. That was hard for me to sort of play those different roles. And so I really enjoyed being in-house, and the range of things I got to work on at Genentech was truly phenomenal. I had an amazing run there. So
Interesting. Now, since Genentech, you obviously have been GC now at a few different companies. Maybe talk a little bit about some of the differences between those companies, and what were some of the key highlights of some of those.
yeah, at Genentech, I was kind of Mr. Litigation, and for a long time, and then eventually transitioned to a role that was not just litigation, but also I got to oversee patent prosecution and some patent licensing. But like at Genentech, I got to go to I had a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, I had a case that went to the California Supreme Court, like sort of all of that. And so post Genentech, I really was looking aggressively for positions where I could do anything but litigation. And it's hard. You get to a certain point in your career where people want you for what they consider to be your strongest skill.
Yeah, right.
I had law firms that wanted me to come back to a law firm and be a litigator at a law firm, now that I had so many cases go to jury verdict and all that. And I did something that was really hard for me to do, and was a real ego hit that I knew was happening at the time, but was hard, where I went from a VP at Genentech, where I oversaw 90 folks in my group who reported up through me. I was one of the youngest VPs at the time at Genentech, to a individual contributor role at a startup company called Amyris, that was a biotech, sort of green tech startup company. And the reason I went is because the role was to do transactions, to draft and negotiate big collaborations that had a little bit of an IP component, but really to be a deal lawyer.
Yeah.
And people told me I was nuts, including the CEO at Genentech at the time I left. But it was a tough choice to make. Not everyone has the privilege to be able to make that choice, because I was taking a huge salary cut. I was taking a huge sort of status and prestige cut. But it sort of started me on my current path of being really a generalist and a corporate lawyer. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that is interesting. And so then you also, not only do you learn the deal lawyer aspect, then you also learned all the corporate and securities aspects too, which I'm sure it sounds like you probably didn't have a lot of experience with before that either.
No, not at all. So at Amyris, I was a deal lawyer for several months, and before I was there a year, the current GC left, and there was actually an in-house group of 8 folks. But I was asked, even though I was the newest and least senior member on the HR, to put my name in the sort of hat to be considered as general counsel. And ultimately, I was chosen to be general counsel there, and was general counsel there for about a year and a half. And so it was trial by fire, Richard. I mean, it was I learned a lot of securities law and corporate law disclosure and all of that. And I knew some of it from a litigation standpoint. I had been involved in some security law litigations, but I had no idea sort of the standards for, when you need to file an 8K, what needs to be included in a 10K, what you need to make sure is in a board deck, all those things. I had a really great number two, who before I actually accepted the job, I told him, I said, I'm not going to take this job you unless you help me on these issues and stay with me. And I said, and in return, I will groom you on those things that I know you need to be groomed on, and we'll sort of, hopefully it'll be a win-win situation. And we kind of sort of had a informal handshake. And when I left Amherst, he was able to succeed me as general counsel because I was able to give him some more exposure to things that he needed exposure to outside securities law. So.
Well, without being too immodest or anything, what do you think the reason you got the nod, even though you were the most junior person in the Amherst, the GC? What do you know, or what do you suspect was the reason they gave it to you?
Um, it's a good question. I think I had shown at my time at Genentech, I dealt with many cases that involved over $1 billion at stake that went to jury verdict that were very high risk situations. And I think I was able to, in the course of that, show very good judgment and to become a really good communicator, to be able to tell the business what the right risks were. And so I'd like to think that it was partially because of sort of my experience from Genentech of being able to deal with those high risk situations, and then to be able to use some of those skills during my time at Amherst. It was a complex company because it had gone public at a time that was very sort of bubbly, and then it never quite recovered for a while. Its IPO price, and so there were some investors who just wanted out. There were some investors who were willing to wait it out. So it was a complex company, a complex situation, and I think maybe I just showed good skills in being able to sort of navigate those types of risks. But I don't know that it's any one thing, to be honest. So,
Tell me about your current position, how you landed your current position.
um, I was not looking for it at all. I got recruited from a recruiting firm who was retained to help hire for the position. When I got the call the first time, I said, no way, not me. It was only through subsequent discussions with a very beloved recruiter who I think you know, Carol Simon, that I said, okay, I'm open to considering the position. I had been for a couple years at genetic editing companies, and most recently was at a company, Mammoth, that was trying to use CRISPR to do in vivo gene editing. So really very cutting edge technologies that will ultimately change the world. And one of our co-founders was Jennifer Doudna, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for her discoveries and inventions in CRISPR technology. And we were using a variation of different CRISPR technology to do these truly amazing things. And that was very energizing for me. I thought it was sort of my last gig. And I got reached out for this position and asked to consider throwing my name in the hat again. And originally said no. And then in a follow-up discussion with Carol, she said, I think you really have the type of background that you would really enjoy this position. And so I gave it some more thought. She caught me on one of those days where I thought, what am I doing at this startup? You have the good days and the bad days at startup. It's very roller coastery. And so I said, sure. And I was super lucky. My first discussion with someone at the company was with the CEO, who is truly amazing, really high EQ, high IQ, incredibly dedicated to the mission. And I kind of decided, hook, line, and sinker, that wow, this is a job I really want. And then went through the process, which took sort of several weeks and a lot of interviews and presentations and all of those things. But it was again not a particularly linear process and not anything I was looking for, nor even anything I thought I wanted. So.
Well, I'm pretty familiar with Intuitive Surgical because one of my past guests is a very close friend, Mark Meltzer, whose name
Exactly.
I'm sure you know if you don't know him personally. But for the rest of my audience who maybe not know, tell us a little bit about Intuitive Surgical. It's an amazing company.
It is. We've been around for, almost 30 years, and we are sort of committed to minimally invasive healthcare, and our real first steps in that is minimally invasive surgery. So you think for hundreds of years, surgery was always done in an open surgery way, where you would have to do huge incisions in order to essentially rip open the body and to be able to do what you needed to do within the human body to sort of accomplish the goals of the surgery. And that much later, a couple decades ago, there was sort of invention of laparoscopic surgery, where you could not use quite such invasive ways, but you could get into the body in a way that was less invasive and to try and accomplish the same things. And so we then took that type of laparoscopic surgery one step further by using robots that are incredibly precise and can get into the body in a really incredibly minimally invasive way, minimally invasive surgery, and to be able to both examine and to suture and to sew and to ablate and to do sort of all the things that you can do with open surgery in a soft tissue setting, but to be able to do it in a way that is less disruptive to the patient, allows for quicker recovery times, often requires fewer people, fewer hospital staff, less sort of risk of severe infection. So it's a really powerful mission. And what we found is that it's not just about surgery, but it's just about minimally invasive healthcare generally. So we have a product that can help get to parts of the lung that we can see growths that would be really hard to detect with other types of instruments, whether they were x-rays or other things, because we get into the body in a minimally invasive way through our version of this robot. So it's a really exciting company. We have a huge sort of footprint already. We're across the globe. We have over 13,000 employees across the globe, but we're growing. That's the amazing thing. So it's not a company that's sort of, resting on its laurels. I think we see that we could be, we could do so much more with this type of technology, and that's the real excitement. Sorry, that was a really long answer, but you can tell I'm sort of really jazzed up.
Really cool. Really cool. Well, Gary, do you ever reflect on any days how, if it weren't for the fact that your partner had to move to San Francisco, or if the partner at Howard Rice didn't leave, that you'd still be a patent litigator, maybe in Los Angeles? I mean, and what kind of career that would have led? I mean, do you ever think about that as an alternative life?
I do. I don't have regrets about anything that's happened, and I think it's it's interesting when I look back. Every career move I've made and each sort of thing I've done, I feel prepared me in some way for what I was going to do next and made me better at it. And particularly the range of experiences I had being at a startup and doing things way outside law, like having to lead HR or facilities or IT, or for a while business development at a company, make me such a better general counsel at a big company where really I am just in the legal mode. So I think that it's hard to predict the way our experiences are going to help us or what they're going to mean to us. And so I do think about a world where, I just sort of stuck to the path. And there are people who were in my class at Quinn Emanuel who are still there and partners there today and have had incredibly successful careers. And that was really a place where you could do that and grow with the firm. I was kind of there at the right time with respect to that. Super grateful that that's not the path I took, and really, really blessed for the range of experiences and the people I've met. But I think it's easy to want to sort of control the outcome. And I think it's what I've tried to find is just to think about, what's the process and am I enjoying now? Is what I'm doing now something that I'm finding rewarding?
Yeah. Well, that leads me to the perfect segue to my probably last question for you is there another future? Is there a future for Gary Loeb doing something else besides the GC of public companies? I mean, you've obviously done that. You've done startups. You were in private practice. You've kind of done all the different lawyer roles. What else could you see yourself doing?
I've been here 15 months. This is a great job. I am still, I love that I am 30 years into my career and still growing as a general counsel in this role. I'm surrounding myself with people who are much smarter, in many ways more ambitious than I am, and I'm trying to be their mentor. I think it's something that I've really tried to focus on in my career, is always bringing other people along. I've had, I think, 7 direct reports who have gone on to be general counsels of publicly traded companies, and I'm so proud of that. It's not, I don't take credit for it all, but I think at least I take credit for, wow, I chose great people who have this capacity in them. I don't sort of make any sort of thoughts that I'm responsible for that. But so I'm pretty darn happy here. I have stopped taking any recruiting calls. Literally, I just don't even take them. So I am done. I cannot imagine any other in-house gig. I've always thought that maybe at some point in my life, maybe I would go teach high school biology or do something like that. And I'm getting to the point where maybe I'm too old to do that, but you never know. So I don't know, maybe 5 years from now, follow up with me and maybe that'll be my career path. But I feel like this role in particular is so complex, so interesting on a global level, that it's kind of the perfect bookend to my in-house career, with sort of Genentech as the start and this as the back end. So.
Well, Gary, it's been a wonderful conversation. Congratulations on all your success. And it's incredible listening. It's a great story listening to your success. If you do decide to become a high school biology teacher, please come back and tell me about it.
Okay, absolutely. Absolutely. A new podcast.
This is Richard Hsu and Gary Loeb. Thanks.
Thanks.